In the last episode, you heard from Lisa Roser, founder of 50 Flowers, who talked about how intentional customer touchpoints was key to growing to nine figures. Now, today on episode number 49, get ready. Alec Avedissian, I screwed that up, right?
Don't worry, dude. Avedissian.
Avedissian. This is maybe me where like English as a second language becomes a bit tricky, even though I've been mostly speaking English for most of my life. Avedissian. Today on episode number 49, get ready. Alec Avedissian, co-founder and CEO of Rareform, a company that makes one-of-a-kind bags from recycled billboards, will be talking about how to pivot quickly as an eight-figure brand when you have to constantly adapt to the market. I'm your host, Raphael Paulin-Daigle, and I'm the founder of SplitBase. This is Minds of Ecommerce. Now, this episode is brought to you by SplitBase. At SplitBase, we help leading 8 and 9-figure brands such as Dr Squatch, Hyperice, Amica, Once Upon a Farm grow through customer-focused conversion optimization programs. Our programs pinpoint exactly where your store is losing money most, and then, well, we help you fix it. The result, well, you get increased conversions, higher AOV, and of course, more money, which in return, well, allows you to scale advertising profitably. We've been at it for over a decade and can help you manage the CRO process from A to Z. From customer research, conversion design, strategy, copywriting, development, we focus on growing your e-commerce sales while you get to focus on what you do best. So you can go to splitbase.com to request a free proposal today and to learn how we can help you get the most out of your marketing spend. All right, Alec, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Stoked to be here.
Yeah, now, as you know, this podcast is all about going deep, dissecting, one key growth strategy so our listeners can get as much value as possible right away. And you've been running Rareform now for how many years, just for context?
Yeah, about 12 years. Started
12
2012,
years.
2013, yeah.
And now you're an eight-figure brand and has achieved considerable success.
Yeah, that is relative, but yes, yeah, 8-figure brand. Yeah, we are learning every day, definitely.
Amazing. Now, I know when we were talking just ahead of this recording, you mentioned how about how you guys handled pivots. And you actually started as a surf bag company. Did I get that right?
Yeah, we did. Our first product was a surfboard bag, and now we pivoted, and we do that every once in a while as like a limited drop, but we now do mostly, everyday totes, bags, accessories, hip packs, things like that.
Yeah, so obviously getting to eight figures probably requires a lot of pivots, but I'm also conscious the wrong pivot can also be fatal. And this is what I'd love to dig a little deeper with you today. And I'm curious, when it comes to pivots, such as completely changing what's your product line,
Yeah.
how do you know when you have to pivot? How do you know what's a shiny pivot or shiny object that you have to avoid chasing and when it's something you actually have to do? Or could you just have kept going with the surf bags? Love to know just your philosophy on pivoting
Yeah,
when you're growing to that scale.
yeah, that's a really good question. I would say for us, I have a mentor that says like go the way that the market is taking you a little bit, and I think you have to
Mm,
be okay with that. For us, I think we started in something that we knew, and I was, my brother and I were surfers, and we have always been surfing, so we that was like one thing we knew. But then when we started seeing like what was selling and what kept being the piece that people kept coming back for was a secondary product to us, but then it ended up
mm,
being the customer's primary like product. And I think for us, it took us far too long to pivot,
mm.
truthfully. So I think that cost us. But then as soon as we did, it really helped us. The problem though is like you do feel bad because you're alienating in essence, or you're kind of taking the very first customers that maybe bought into the brand for reason X, because they had like some connection through whether it was surf or the beach or the outdoors to now something else. So you don't want to alienate them, but you also want to have them be part of that journey with you, which I think
Yeah.
is really critical. And over time we keep shifting. Like the best brands are the ones that you hear about, like, hey, the creative director for this brand is now this creative director of this brand, because
Yeah.
they have to move. Brands have to move and evolve.
Yeah, I want to go back to that one of those first pivots. You said you pivoted too late. Why do you think so?
Yeah, I think we pivoted too late because I think we kept trying to put, I don't know what the saying is, like, um, we kept trying to make it work for far too
Mm,
long. Whether we kept looking at, hey, was it the price point that wasn't working, or was it the quality of the product, or was it the design of the product? And then pretty soon we were like, or maybe is it just the product, that we were offering wasn't right for the market. Um, and I think we tried fixing all those other things until we finally came to the conclusion, like, well, hang on, maybe it's not just the right product market fit for that one product.
mm.
And then what other ones were actually working that we weren't putting time into. So it was like the 80-20 rule. 20% of our sales was coming, 80% of our sales was coming from a product that we put 20% of our time in, you know? And all of a sudden we were like, hang on, let's wake up a second and let's look what's
Yeah.
actually moving the needle here.
Interesting. I'm also curious, like, let's say we actually go a little further into your timeline and more to the current day. Obviously, I think the risks that comes with pivoting when you're doing eight figures are much greater than when you're maybe starting out. Um, I know you guys have been very big at iterating on your current product. So what are some of those things that you do systematically in terms of iterations and pivots that are that's really helping you be at the level that you're at today?
Um, I would say one thing that probably has helped us a lot is actually the pivoting of like actual business segments. So we have the
Mm,
D2C business, right? Like, but we started as wholesale. Like when we started, D2C was there, but it wasn't as
yeah.
big. Like we started with wholesale. So we got into like the REIs of the world, the Best Buys of the world, kind of, and then also the boutiques. And we realized like the big stores didn't really work for us. They didn't tell our story because our brand is more about the story and finding your like the piece that fits to your lifestyle, the bag that fits to that. And so we started then pivoting to like boutiques, like, hey, that works better for us.
Mm.
Um, but the big piece for us has been also pivoting like, hey, we are D2C business, but also we have a recycling arm of our, like where we are a recycler, like a
Oh,
service provider for companies. So if D2C goes down, like we have
yeah.
a pivot that allows us to like offset that decrease in sales by doing something else.
That is
So
so
we have a
interesting.
few different business verticals. And I think that's been key for us. That helped us, through the pandemic and obviously at different times when, hey, something's not working on one side of the business, this other piece might be working. Um, so for us, that helped us, quite a bit.
So I think this is like a really good lesson and takeaway where you are able to find I don't know how to say it, but a second purpose to the business that allows, for one side of the business to always do well no matter what, and they're connected, but also not super connected to another. Was it like that from the get-go? Were you always both a recycler and the manufacturer and seller, or did that come later?
No, we didn't have it all when we started at all. I
Huh.
wish we would have because it would have helped us realize. But it was kind of that same sort of thing. Like we kind of started following, like as soon as we started recycling for the out of home industry, these billboards, like we recycle now 80% of all the billboards in the US. So
Wow.
we're a glorified trash man, really. Um, and Rareform is the consumer side of that business. But once we started being like a solutions provider to the corporations and those companies for their recycling, more people started coming to us like, hey, can you find a solution for this for us? And we used to always say, no, no, we're sorry, we don't do that. And now we're starting to say yes to that. And it's like when you start saying yes to things, I think maybe you have to say no to the right things and saying yes to the right things. I don't know how that makes
Hmm.
sense, but yeah.
I'm wondering how intentional, like, so obviously it takes a lot of work, and obviously there's a business in just recycling business. That's a business on its own. When you guys started doing that, was it consciously a strategy to help the other business, in case it wouldn't go so well? Or did it
Yeah.
just like over time develop as like a great add-on?
Well, I would say it's definitely a great add-on, right? But it helps us grow. But I think it also, as a CEO or a business owner,
Yeah.
you're always trying to think about tomorrow. Like my brother and I are co-founders in this, and the way we say like, what do we do? What one person does, the other person. like I always say, he works on today and I work on tomorrow.
Yes.
And I think for me, being the CEO is I'm looking, 2 years, 5 years out, rather than where we get in trouble is when we both start looking at day to day, because then we're worrying about like the little things that aren't keeping us focused on the big picture. And I think, yeah, I'm always kind of looking for the next thing for us. I mean, maybe that's also a distraction too, because I get totally distracted and my ADD is crazy. But I also think that allows us to like quickly cut things or find something that we can, push towards and see if that'll actually be an avenue we can grow and diversify.
So, I mean, I think ADHD is a commonality across many of us entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
uh, and it's always a challenge to deal with. In your case, right? How do you know like when you need to do a pivot? How do you know if it's a distraction or a worthwhile business move?
Hmm. I think a lot of it is gut. I
Hmm.
think where if I try to overanalyze things,
Yeah.
I think that's when I get bogged down and I don't make it. But I think now a lot of it is gut. And I think if I knew now what I didn't know when I started, I would have never started the business. But
Right.
there's almost like a naive optimism that you have to have that allows you to like go with your gut to say like, I think there's something there. I think that's going to work. Obviously it's not foolproof, but I think there's that just from experience. Like now we've been at this for, more than a decade.
Yeah.
Um, and so we've made terrible decisions, obviously, but we've also made some really good ones that have helped us when, if we didn't make those pivots, we wouldn't have got to where we are. Yeah.
How do you apply this process of iteration and decisions to the product creation process? Because obviously, like there's a lot of different bags you can create. You do have, quite a few SKUs as well on the website.
Yeah.
Um, how do you utilize, yeah, how do you make decision when it comes to actual product design and merchandising?
Um, yeah. So the great thing about Rareform and the absolute worst thing about Rareform is that every bag we make is an
One of a
original bag.
kind. Yeah.
Yes. So it's like if you buy that bag, you know, that one is gone and another one takes its spot online. So we have probably 50,000 SKUs, upwards to like 70,000 SKUs online at one time and in our warehouse. So it becomes a nightmare, but also like a huge blessing.
Yeah.
So I think for us on the product iteration side of things, we really worry about the silhouette. And
Yep.
is this silhouette something that can be timeless? Because what we receive in, like the outside of our bags, are always going to be different based on the colors of the billboards and the graphics.
Hmm.
So we can't really control that. We can only control one piece. So we worry about what we can control, which is the silhouette. And just like anything, we are looking at what's in the market. What are other people doing? Finding inspiration on trips, or just finding a way to be different too. I think is key for us. And if we lose
Hmm.
that, like sometimes we get too into like, oh, let's anniversary that product. That was really good, you know, or let's come back and let's do an iteration on that. When
Yeah.
really it's like, hang on, maybe we should actually just scrap that and start thinking creatively again. You know?
I'm guessing that 20% of your silhouettes generate 80% of the revenue. Would I be wrong by assuming that?
Yeah.
Or
No, you're totally right. Yeah, I think most businesses. Yeah.
how often do you test new silhouettes and how often do you get rid of different silhouettes?
Yeah, every year we're definitely doing it. So it's maybe not so much. We used to do things more to try to stay in like the apparel or
Yep.
fashion, seasons. We mostly do things in like two times a year. So we kind of just have two
Hmm.
seasons the way we look at it. And so we have products that come out, at one time of the year, and either those work or they stay or do they flop or do we get other ones? But it's pretty quick for us to know. And sometimes we are like, hey, did that not work because it was a price? And we kind of go back to that same thing. Did it go to a price? Was it the colors?
Hmm.
Or was it maybe the wrong marketing that didn't get the word out correctly? So we have to kind of go on gut, or do we say, hey, that was a total flop? Like I'll give you an example. Like we did iPhone cases,
Yep.
and I thought iPhone cases for us were going to be great. like we got them into Best Buy. We started, and all of a sudden, our customer just did not want them. And I was just like, I don't understand why. It's the coolest thing in the world. I thought it was cool, but nobody else thought it was cool.
Yeah.
So you also, have to let things die that you think maybe are amazing, but the market doesn't like.
Yeah, totally. I'm kind of curious here though, because every product is one of a kind, right? You do have an additional factor where when you make a decision whether you keep a silhouette or not, you have to wonder, is it the silhouette or is it the specific products that we created out of that silhouette? Um,
Totally.
how do you think through that challenge?
Uh, well, I would say there's certain classic silhouettes, right?
Right.
At least in the bag world, that are timeless. And I think for
Mm,
us, those are ones that we lean into. Obviously, there's going to be certain trends, like the hip pack or the fanny pack, for instance, the last couple of years has been a very big thing
mm,
for everyone. And so I think for us is also staying like ahead and trying to think through, hey, how do we iterate on something that's a classic and keep it fresh? So I don't think there is we just are constantly looking at the products, like constantly getting in samples, constantly putting up mood boards, inspiration, trying to find things.
yeah. And I think one of the lessons here is not to be afraid of taking out products from your offering when you realize
Totally.
it's not working.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
I probably have a lot of those products that we probably, that I loved that, I probably have them around here in my office that no one else really liked.
Yeah, and there's always a thing, we've worked with a bunch of like apparel and fashion brands, and one thing I realize is the additional silhouettes or products or styles is both a blessing and a curse in the sense that you
Totally.
have more options for customers, which is great, more opportunities to buy, but then you're also leading to more analysis paralysis, which can also
100%.
hurt the decision a
100%.
little bit. So
Yeah.
awesome,
That's so
Alec.
true.
Now, if you were to start this business all over again, what would you do differently?
Oh, that is a hard question, my friend. What would I do differently? I think I would have thought about this business from my standpoint more as I thought of it more as a revolution, I think, than an evolution. So
Mm,
I should have been hyper focused on making things just a slightly different than everything else so people could see it as an evolution, whereas I think we made it like a pretty big revolution where people don't necessarily want to do that. So what I mean by that is like our bags are very colorful. They're bold, they're original. They fit someone's style, but at the same reason, that's what makes it difficult. And so being okay, like trying to stay, like to your point, like our website should follow the same path as most brands. Like you go to a
yeah.
collection page, then a PDP page, and then a check, whereas like we were trying to help somebody choose and do this work for them. It's like, wait a second, this has been working. Why are you trying to change it? You know? So I think evolution versus revolution would have been something I would have kept in mind.
Mm,
And then I would have I would have definitely gone heavier on D2C earlier in those early years.
yeah.
Um, definitely when it was easier. And then
Awesome.
yeah, I think
We've been
creative.
talking to Alec Avedissian, who's CEO and co-founder of Rareform. Now, Alec, thank you so much. Now, if people want to learn more about you or Rareform, where should they go?
Go to rareform.com and then you can always check me out on Twitter or LinkedIn and hope to get back to you there.
Awesome. Alec, thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Robert.